Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Ignite You New York podcast powered by NYSTEC. I'm your host, Shay Brown, and today we're going to be sitting down with my colleagues, Kim Fredericks and Finn Kreidler, talking about the SBIR Act changes that are coming down the pipe for everybody. We're going to focus in on what SBIR is, but then we're really going to expand into the changes that are coming and how those are directly impacting the small businesses that are contracting with the federal government. All right, why don't we go ahead and get started? Finn, would you give us a little introduction about yourself?
Sure. So my name is Finn Kreidler. I'm the Senior Procurement Counselor at the Empire Apex Accelerator. Been doing this for about 4 years now, and I think I started really working with the SBIR STTR program a year and a half into my time. So I've been doing this for a little while, and I'm excited to be here today.
Hi everybody, my name is Kim Fredericks. I'm a Senior Principal Consultant here at NYSTEC in the Ignite You program. I work a lot with federal clients that we have, as well as small businesses, helping them with SBIR. We have an SBIR Technical Assistance Program. We also do a lot with technology transfer and other aspects of scaling and commercialization.
Well, thank you guys so much for being here today. I love getting a moment to hang out with my colleagues and talk shop, so this is going to be a fun one for me today. Kim, why don't you give me a brief overview of what SBIR really is?
We love acronyms, particularly in the federal government. So we've already given you a bunch of acronyms today. SBIR is Small Business Innovation Research Fund, and STTR has to do with Small Business Technology Transfer. And so those are very key federal programs to spur on innovation in America, particularly with small businesses. It allows our procurement process within government to really be more diversified by allowing small entities to come about. And there are some nuanced differences between each program, eligibility, funding amounts, processes a little bit based on the agency that you're going for. So it's really, really important that if you're even considering these types of granting programs, some are grants, some are contracts, that you really look into investigating what those differences are.
Kim, thank you so much for that overview. I really appreciate that. Finn, would you give us an idea of the role that Empire Apex Accelerator plays in all of this?
Apex Accelerator is a sort of nationwide cooperative grant. So we are run in partnership with the Office of Small Business Programs, and really our role here at the Empire Apex is specifically to help small businesses government contract, right? And that can be in many ways, not just relegated to sort of this innovation funding or this program, but when we're specifically talking about SBIR or innovation programs in general, really we're here to act as sort of small business counselors, to help these businesses who some might have experience working with the government, some might not. So we're here to fill that role of answering questions for them, helping review certain portions of the application, or just generally trying to direct them sort of to the areas that we think might be beneficial for them to look at. So it's really a joint sort of advisory and education role, to sort of succinctly describe it.
It sounds like you're doing something where you're connecting the big picture of federal initiatives to smaller businesses.
We might not be your Apex Accelerator. It's sort of broken up by counties. We specifically cover majority of upstate New York. That's not sort of touching the Finger Lakes. So Capital Region, Mohawk Valley, you can go to our website to see more. But all Apex Accelerators across the US are able to help you at no cost. So definitely recommend checking it out if you're not familiar with our program.
So Kim, can you then tell us how is SBIR really tying in advanced technologies into these small businesses and the initiatives that are kind of already in place besides the changes that are coming about?
I'll just step back for half a second. When we talk about SBIR and STTR programs, STTR is really about technology transfer. SBIR is more broadly identified, and it's for small business concerns. So if you're majority owned in the US and operate in the US and you have 500 employees or less, that's a general idea if you would qualify to be a small business entity as far as these programs are concerned. Technology transfer has one other step, and it's usually a small business interacting with a nonprofit research entity. So it could be a university, it could be a Department of Energy federal lab, for example, or other nonprofit research entities. So those are some of the general overlaps, and there are various phases to SBIR and STTR. There's phase 1, phase 2, and although technically not a phase, there's phase 3 of those programs. So you will see them come out, and there are agencies will have their broad agency announcements or specific topics where they're looking for technology or innovation around very particular needs within the government. And some have more open focused types of announcements where it might be a more generalized area. Maybe it's cybersecurity versus something as particular as copper mining. I'm making this up, but you have those two different types of announcements. Each agency has their own rules around it, funding requirements, minimum, maximums. They roll them out very differently. The largest enterprise or agency group of agencies is the Department of War, which has Army, Navy, Air Force, DARPA, various agencies subsumed under that. But most agencies, NASA, Department of Energy, Department of Transportation, USDA, etc., either participate in both SBIR and STTR, or at least the SBIR program itself. So there are a lot of opportunities out there, but it really is an opportunity to get funding to propel an idea, particularly if you're a small business. Some of these technologies, if you're talking quantum, if you're talking AI, semiconductor, it takes a lot of capital, it takes a lot of money to progress that idea. So it's an outlet, it's an avenue to spur on that innovation, and then potentially have the federal government as a customer, and we fill the needs of the government.
If I'm a small business and I'm interested in trying to contract with the government in one of the entities that you mentioned, how should I go about figuring out and soliciting which entity would probably best fit my needs as a small business, that I feel like I'm hitting the market need for that entity?
First, I would always recommend going to see your Apex Accelerator, because they can really fine-tune what you're doing. And understanding the phases and the different avenues. So when you talk generally in phase 1 of SBIR or STTR programs, it's feasibility, it's proof of concept. Do I have a truly commercializable idea, or is it just a passion? A lot of small business owners have ideas, their passions, their hobbies, but is this really something I can sell? And then phase 2 is really furthering the commercial potential of that idea, whether it's product, service, technology, whatever you want to call it, and moving your proof of concept, maybe having a minimal viable product, and really moving it forward to see if it can commercialize and can scale. So depending on the industry that you're in or the vertical that you're in, might lend you to a certain agency and their programs. If it's food related, you might be in the USDA, or agriculturally related. If it's health related, NIH or NSF might be your area that you want to go in, and you would look for those solicitations, which are all in sam.gov. Some of them are in DSIP. Department of Defense opportunities are all in there. And again, your Apex can help you with sam.gov registration and understanding different business entities and certificates that might help you in that process.
Working with small businesses that have sort of the desires to pursue this innovation funding, one question I often get asked is, oh, what does the government need? Like, what can we provide them? And a lot of the times my answer does tend to be to that, well, what do you want to develop and research, right? Like, if your specific skill set is in, microgrid technologies, I'm not going to suggest you go pursue an NIH sort of grant around vaccines, right? It's more of where do your skills align, and if you have a broad skill set or maybe a couple different technologies you're working on, that's when you can sort of investigate either if there's a call for a technology that fits precisely with you. There's a lot out there for specific needs that the government has. Then there are also some of these more broad announcements where they're looking for new technologies and they're putting a call out for you to propose something. So it also is a little bit about, are there specific opportunities you can pursue that do actually fall under what you're doing? But my advice to people always is, don't go out and just sort of see what's out there and then try to shoehorn yourself in. Just really go with what sort of you're able to do, what technology you want to work on, because you'll get so much farther if you have a compelling case for R&D, commercialization, that sort of thing.
There's a lot of different avenues as a small business you can go down. I think that that's really exciting because it allows small business owners to actually do the thing, like you said, that they're passionate about, that their skills are in, rather than kind of constraining themselves and following, the checking boxes off for a government, entity to partner with them or contract with them. It just adds a layer of stress rather than the passion behind the work that they're doing, which is what we all really want. We want small businesses to build the things that they're passionate about. So when it comes to, I'm a small business. I'm interested in doing this. Maybe I've already been working with Empire Apex Accelerator. Maybe I've started to get, my certifications in, all of that. What are some of the changes right now that are happening that I should be aware of as I start to maybe integrate more into this?
Again, it's the SBIR Act. It was just passed. It importantly reauthorizes the SBIR program for 5 years, which allows for some continuity amongst agencies, amongst government, and we're not going back and forth again, which creates turmoil and causes awards not to be in cycle and funded. And it creates a lot of confusion. So this is a 5-year reauthorization. The basic tenets of this new bill are out, and that act goes to the Small Business Association, and they provide further guidance as well as each agency or agency entity. So the Department of War provides, the Secretary of the Department of War provides guidance on the implementation of some of these changes. So this is still a moving target in some ways. We'll see how it goes. A lot of this implementation is due October 1st, which is the next fiscal year. So you will see everything in effect. I mean, some things have started to go into effect with some of these announcements, but full changes will be October 1st. So we need to get ourselves ready and wrapped around some of those changes. The first big one is there are awards called Direct to Phase 2, and you'll hear D2P2. Again, we love those acronyms. So if you've been in business for a while or maturing a technology or a product, and you really do have some feasibility, some proof of concept, you might be able to go straight to a Direct to Phase 2. And you can now get some technical assistance help with that. It's called TABA, Technical and Business Advice Assistance, through that program now. So they're expanding the opportunity to motivate and to accelerate your commercialization opportunities. So that is one of the first big changes that is coming about. Another huge change is more scrutiny by the agencies on foreign ties, foreign investments, particularly around intellectual property. So you have to do your due diligence to ensure that you don't have any foreign influence, if you will, with your technology, with your company. So do any of your key stakeholders in your company have foreign ties or foreign influence? Does your intellectual property, does your patent that you're using have some foreign investment or foreign ties? It's very complicated. I am concerned about this for the small business because it can be onerous to do that, especially if if I'm starting out creating a product, I might take technologies off the shelf, if you will, technologies to put together my minimal viable product or my prototype. I'm not sure always how to find out if that IP, that intellectual property, is, related to a foreign entity or not. So again, I'm concerned for our small businesses around this, and there are some strategies I hope we can talk about in another podcast or put out some information for folks, but there's going to be increased scrutiny on that, and you can be denied if there is some suspicion around foreign involvement. And there's a lot more emphasis too on manufacturing within the US as well, as you can see. And particularly red flags will be anything related to defense technology, cybersecurity, quantum, AI, anywhere you'll even be under further scrutiny. So unfortunately, that's a big change, and it's a little bit of, I think, is going to be a hurdle for our small businesses, as well as the agencies who now have the responsibility of that follow through to make sure that's the case.
So I want to know, can you explain a little bit more what you mean when you say foreign influence and how that particularly kind of sets up a small business? Because you're talking about how maybe they might take technology off the shelf and utilize it to generate a prototype. So are you suggesting that maybe if they're getting microchips from, let's say, like China, just to build their prototypes, that could be an issue, things as simple as that?
That's a perfect example, yes, because they're worried about cybersecurity, they're worried about having our infrastructure sort of compromised. I'm not a cybersecurity person, but having a trail or access to some of our critical things, whether it's locations of our troops, or if there's somehow a way to infiltrate that using a chip, a microchip, or a program, is what the concern really is. And so you nailed it. That, in essence, is what we're concerned about and why these regulations came down.
The requirements that have existed in regards to foreign ownership and control are somewhat on the ownership side of the business, and then there's these sort of additional things that Kim is talking to about sort of cybersecurity and physical technology and all that. So one thing I do want to point out for those businesses that might be looking at this and are sort of not up to speed, one, on the tech side, if we're talking cyber, that's, I think, one of the biggest things that excited a lot of my clients about sort of this reauthorization is now you can use those TABA funds for
Absolutely.
cybersecurity assistance, which is great. So, you can worry about sort of that side of the house of things if you're trying to make sure that your systems are secure and all that, and prevent foreign sort of ingress that way. Then when we're talking about the ownership and control aspect, FOCI is sort of the statute that, or sort of the set of rules that governs that. And there's not really a one-size-fits-all approach. You really do need to talk with someone like us, at the Empire Apex Accelerator, or other counselors, to ensure that you don't have undue foreign influence, whether it's an amount of money that's invested from your business from a foreign entity, which again is fine, but it has to be below a certain amount. There's not a one-size-fits-all approach until you get to if your company is owned by a majority of foreign corporation. That's usually sort of the biggest red flag cutoff, but sort of situation by situation specific, where there's that one side of things of not using technology that's sort of on that prohibited list, and then also making sure that your business is primarily controlled and operated by a U.S. permanent resident.
I feel like a theme today is going to be contact your local accelerator.
There's a lot of programs out there, depending on where you are, that can help you with acceleration, scaling, prototyping. It's amazing what help is out there. And TABA funds, these technical assistance funds, can also be used to look at intellectual property and assess whether or not there's a substantial influence. What you don't ever want to do is be on what I call a bad kids list of because you didn't do some due diligence or ask questions. And the agencies also have open communication lines often where you could discuss those types of things because maybe you don't have an option or or you know of one. So they might have some recommendations. And there's also the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification, CMMC, and certainly Apex deals a lot with that. That's been around for a while. Implementation has been sort of staggered. There are 3 phases to that because we love phases. Phase 1 is really looking about federal contracting information and doing some self-assessment. Phase 2 is worried really about controlled unclassified information and making sure that you have external assessment. But you will see now in these SBIR and STTR announcements that you need to meet level 1 or level 2 CMMC certification. Project Spectrum is a big government program to assist with CMMC in understanding what you need to do and how to be more cyber secure, if you will, and more cyber aware. So I would recommend, again, looking into that if you're going to consider even contracting with the government, not even in the SBIR STTR programs, but really getting yourself up to speed in that area as well.
Another thing I feel like I'm hearing a lot of is, do your research, get up to speed, because there are things that are coming and good things that are coming. Look, there's a lot of scrutiny involved, but it seems like there's not really an avenue for excuses of not having this information, because there are a lot of ways to get this information, not just an Empire Apex Accelerator, but you're talking about these entities also being open doors. You're able to come in and be honest about what your products are. Now, if I'm a small business and I'm in a competitive industry, that might be a little nerve-wracking, right? Because when you have competitive products, you don't necessarily want to give away, the chef's secret, so to speak, right, of what makes your special sauce. So what would you say to a small business that maybe they have technology that they're not totally sure in terms of if it's compliant with the new regulations that are coming out, but it's also their secret sauce? How would they address this situation?
I think there's a couple ways to do it. First, you can ask questions, you can go to these other entities, you can go, there's a lot of resources on the government side to sort of do your own research and maybe make your own self-assessment. You can also, there are programs and counselors, whether it's Apex, whether it's a small business administration, that house different incubator accelerator programs, and oftentimes they'll have non-disclosure agreements and confidentiality agreements where things can't be discussed beyond what you're doing. And so feel free to utilize that, or don't fully give away the secret sauce. Maybe give enough or parts of it so that you can have a meaningful conversation, but hold the rest tight to your vest.
Yeah, and I mean, I will say, like, when you're sort of going about these programs and sort of talking about that information, you're generally doing it with either counselors who are bound by different NDAs, or to the government, which is again under its own restrictions, right? So you're usually not going to people who would be able to seal it. The other thing I would just be aware of is marking, right, your data. So making sure to mark proprietary information, trademarked information, things like that, sort of on your proposal when you're submitting, because again, right, if you're not sure about pursuing this program, and it's definitely something that I tell a lot of people, like, before you're getting into even having this conversation about whether, about protecting your secrets, or about who do I go to help with my proposal, like, do you have a technology that either, one, you want to fund a feasibility study for, or two, that you want to sell to the government and you need monetary assistance with commercialization and with further research and development? Like, you're going there first, you're then seeing who is looking to buy that, what agencies have opportunities out there for you, and then once you get that set up, you can dive further into this. Because I have definitely seen that trap before of people being scared about, having their data leaked, or about confidential stuff leaked, and that's definitely a valid concern. There's stuff you can do to mitigate that, but don't get worried about that before you're even sure if these programs are right for you.
Yeah, people are so quick to get a patent in place, which is actually where most technology theft actually happens. But they're afraid to actually have these conversations with the entities that want to buy their technology, want to buy their innovation. And so we want to definitely minimize the amount of fear that people are having, these small businesses are having, maybe with approaching that subject now that there's an increased scrutiny on all of these limitations, all these things in order to get these grants and awards from the federal government. So we want to make sure that they feel comfortable walking in the door. Explain to me a little bit, what is a proposal cap?
Change in the SBIR, or the SBIR Reauthorization Act, was a limit on proposal caps. So what does that mean? Well, for a long time, SBIR programs have gotten a bad rap because you would say, oh, this is a SBIR or STTR mill, where many companies would just fund themselves on repeated SBIR or STTR awards, more so in SBIR, I would think. But so the same companies could put in 3-4 proposals for one solicitation. And so that mill, if you will, they're trying to get rid of that. So there are caps on the numbers of proposals per year that per announcements that companies can apply for, and those will be out there in plain sight come October 1st. And it's going to give more opportunities for others to win these awards. Granted, no business is going to make a run of it, make a full-fledged business just on SBIR awards, right? There's going to have to be some dual use, some commercialization outside of these awards, but it is non-dilutive funding that can sort of propel you forward and really get you started towards the commercialization path. So that's what that change is about, is trying to diversify the pool of applicants and awardees.
Yeah, to just one thing you jumped out that you said just then jumped out at me as well. When you talk about like the SBIR, STTR awards aren't going to propel and like fund your entire business. That's another question we get a lot is, oh, once we get this award, we can just that can just fund all of our business operations. It's not true. You have to submit sort of a detailed budget and detail your expenses and keep track of those sorts of things. So definitely worth keeping in mind that this can't be the only thing that is propelling your business forward. It's definitely an important point to, I think, stress, especially for small businesses who are looking at that phase one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, having diversity in your funding is just critical for any small business, realistically. You can't get your funding stream just from one source. You have to have a diverse pool that you're pulling from. Absolutely. Okay, so it's really good that they've created this cap. But, you might say to yourself as a small business, oh no, less opportunity. But there isn't, correct? There are more pathways, right, that are being opened.
One of the changes that's in this reauthorization is increased emphasis on commercialization and really transitioning, going from that phase 2 where you actually have an MVP or a prototype and you're looking to scale that to what we'd call a phase 3, which really sort of doesn't exist. It means you're a sole provider. And so all of your funding it comes from non-SBIR sources, but you're locked into being a federal or state customer, more so in the federal realm, but a government customer. So you're locked into being a government customer. But agencies are now going to have metrics and follow through to see that commercialization is happening with all of these SBIR grants. So we have more accountability going on and more programs to do that. And one of the new programs is a strategic breakthrough fund, up to $30 million to really accelerate innovative ideas. So there's now a separate breakthrough fund that agencies can use to spur on innovation, particularly if you've gotten a phase 2 or a D2, P2, direct to phase 2. Some more money that can help you really spur along that commercialization. And all of that, every agency has to participate in TABA. It's mandatory, and it can't necessarily be a sole provider. And so now you have increased opportunities to get TABA funding. Depending on the phase you're in, there are different amounts. Businesses have to request it in their application, but you now have every agency participating, so it can give you more advice, more help throughout this whole process.
And to add on a bit to, especially talking through commercialization with a lot of my clients, the big question we get is, oh, well, why is that important? If I create this technology that the government wants to buy, why do I need to worry so much about commercialization? And the language they use a lot in the reauthorization sort of documentation is they use the valley of death a lot, sort of language, which is there in private enterprise as well. But it's really this sort of increased focus on when you're doing phase 1 is feasibility, it's very clearly defined, 6 months up to what is it now, $309,000 or something?
Yeah, it depends on the agency.
Depending on agency funding.
Yep.
Phase 2 is, a year or two of 2 point something million now, but those are very clearly defined. And then once we get post phase 2, it's okay, well, you might be at a point where you're ready to sell to the government, or you might need to do additional production or a little bit of additional sort of funding for additional research or supply chain management or sort of those kind of things. And that's where, in my experience, a lot of the issues do arise, is because I think people tend to have this forward sort of approach, is all right, we're doing step 1, then step 2, then step 3, whereas I really like to sort of look at it backwards. You're thinking about, okay, at the end of the day, the goal is for us to be the sole source provider to the federal government of this technology that we know they need. How do we get there? And so that focus on that commercialization part, on actually making that bridge between sort of finalized development and actually getting it in the hands of the government and getting your money paid for that has traditionally been a huge area of struggle. So I'm very glad that they are sort of working more on this and dedicating more funds to it.
And realistically, when you're in the commercial sector, there could be less obstacles. Versus I have a technology and now I have to work in the government environment.
Yeah.
And I might not have thought through what that environment might be. So I might need additional funds to tweak so that systems are speaking with each other. Or again, I'm not a technical person, but that's often the case. Is it's one thing to be in the private sector environment. It's a whole different entity to be in the government sector.
Yeah. One of the things I do want to highlight as well is the additional $30 million. What's the name of the
Breakthrough Awards?
The Breakthrough Awards. Yeah. So to keep in mind while you're going through phase 1 and 2s, if you're looking at these sort of breakthrough awards and thinking, okay, this is something we're really interested in, it could really push us, over the finish line. That money does need to be matched.
Yes.
So you need 100% match for any agency, except in some cases for the Department of War, you can be matched 20%. So while you're going through phase 1 and 2, make sure you are forming those relationships with government stakeholders as well, right? Because they are going to be the end purchasers. They're going to be the ones who are going to be, fronting that money after you get out of the phase 1 and 2, direct award phase. And so you want to make sure that you're getting those sort of memorandums of understanding from the government, from buyers saying, hey, this is something we really want. We want to buy this, we want to see it produced and shipped to us, so you can obtain those matching funds if it's not something that you have in-house already. Really sort of helps bridge that gap as well.
I think you've hit on some really great points, both of you, and I think, finishing off with what Finn said, my question would be, socially now, How am I developing these relationships with these government entities? What is the path for that to get those memorandums of understanding, to be prepared? Now, we're talking, we're moving along the chain. Maybe you've already done phase 1, you're in phase 2 now. How am I doing that as a small business?
If it's a broad agency announcement with a very particular focus, you will see technical points of contact and program managers that should and will be assisting you through that process to find that customer. Each agency handles that slightly differently. So it's important that you go on. I know the Small Business Association has SBIR pages, the America's Seed Fund, but each agency interprets them, has different processes, different directions of what's included in the application. There's generally 7 volumes. That hasn't changed much, but what might be asked of each business entity might be slightly different. So go read the instructions as with any grant or contract, but also go and look at, you'll see program managers, points of contact. Who are those? Do a little research about that person too, to make sure that they understand your technical area or your product, and start building those relationships early. And then there are other programs like SBIR TAP that are out there that can help you. Ascend is another common name for programs. Agencies will have some of those that can sort of enculturate you into a government entity and how it works. Particularly if you're in the Department of War, there are so many agencies that are looking to do SBIR funds in different aspects.
Yeah, we're using these, like, I think, both Kim and I speak a lot to, like, Department of War specifically, just because that's where so much of the money is. If we're talking agencies, and it's not the only one, but it is one of the easier examples to give. For any agency, though, really, too, the end goal is for you to have a product that people want to use, and so also building in, to your commercialization strategy and your funding for that portion of it, building in sort of attending conferences. Like if you're working on drone tech, go to an AFWorks drone summit or whatnot, that sort of thing. So you're not only reaching out to those structured points of contact, but also you can actually get in front of people and say, hey, we have this really cool technology that I think you guys could use on your Air Force base, or hey, we have this really cool sort of new medical technology that you could use in the VA hospital, right? It's really about putting yourself in front of those program leads who would really benefit from that tech and being able to show them something, do matchmaking sessions. There's a ton of different sort of those government conferences, and it is expensive to travel to them. So definitely building that into the commercialization strategy and leveraging some of your funding for that, I would say, is good.
And sometimes they're called industry weeks. And they'll have different focal areas that they're trying to solicit businesses to come. And some of them are free. Defense Logistic Agency has lots of matchmaking opportunities to come and talk to program managers and things. So it's a lot of legwork and forethought to create that path.
So understanding like the breakdown of all that, how it actually translates into the real world eventually, what can you talk to us about these CBIES Act's changes and how that's really going to impact maybe that phase of the commercializing of your technologies?
The culture is going to shift to really transition companies into being a sole source provider, to get you to that point, to stay in business. If you don't stay in business, you can't sell to the government. And so it's almost that dual use. You can have a technology that you can sell in the private sector as well as the government sector. And you will see programming and money funded around that to get you to that point. Because otherwise, if you don't ever commercialize or scale to be one of the providers for the government, you've wasted all of that money. So I think there's going to be a lot of coalescing around that. And we're going to see how it's going to pan out. Maybe there'll be less. It's still a competitive environment. Probably 10% of phase 1s and phase 2 awards actually get awarded compared to the number of applications. So it's important to gather information, find the right fit, seek out the resources that you can to make a compelling application. And if you're doing that and going through those steps, it's forcing you to put your operational priorities in check and in line to move you forward. So I think it's still a viable avenue for non-dilutive funding. The time horizon is a little bit longer than if you went to get venture funding, for example. You could get it in a lot more timely than going through this process. And for some people who have very cutting edge technology, they might not want to wait for that horizon. It could be 6-8 months before you get a check. You get $1. And so I think it's really important to weigh the pros and cons and keep moving forward.
Yeah, and to add on to that, one thing that I do when talking with businesses, they get really wrapped up in sort of that first, step, like that first application, and then if they get denied, they sort of sometimes they're like, oh, well, I tried, and like got to move on to something else, and that's not always the case. Like, I know we were talking about proposal caps earlier, but those haven't even been set yet, and they're going to be agency set, and you do get a lot of good feedback from majority of the offices when you submit. So it's definitely one of those, if at first you don't succeed, definitely try again, resubmit, make some tweaks, resubmit to a different program office, that sort of stuff. Just getting any of that feedback, if it's 5-10% are making it through, you can go after it a few times, and it is a great source of non-dilutive funding.
Well, great. Honestly, I think we've gotten a lot of wonderful information from both of you, but I just want to ask, as we're kind of rounding out our wonderful conversation here, if I was a small business, what should I be doing right now to prepare for these changes that are coming in October, to be ready and to be a part of the changes? I
would recommend everybody become CMMC compliant. At the very least, phase 1, probably phase 2. We've talked a lot, it's been a slow rollout, and really it's Department of War is really, really focused on that. If you have not already, and I'm gonna do another plug, reach out to programs like Apex or other SBIR TAP technical assistance programs. There are a lot of free resources on government websites. Project Spectrum deals with CMMC, but even cybersecurity, things that are out there published right now on agency websites. So start doing some research.
Yeah, I would say, I guess my advice, it's tough, right? Because there are businesses that I talk to that have no experience with the program. And if I'm talking to them, my advice is like, don't even pay attention to the fact that there's this new sort of reauthorization, really, because a lot of the things that we're talking about today in terms of like increased commercialization support, in terms of that sort of extra scrutiny on that side of cybersecurity and a foreign ownership and control, all that is stuff that is also being pushed on sort of the contracting side. So if it's anyone who's new into sort of the realm of government contracting, I would definitely steer them towards new resources, but say nothing's changing program-wise at the high level. Like the program and the order of operations are still the same. Figure out what technology you want to do a feasibility study on, what sort of that looks like, how you can commercialize it, and go from there. I would say really the big focus is on those businesses that have that familiarity with the program or are already involved in government contracting, who have just been sort of waiting for these changes to take place, like waiting for CMMC 2.0 to be a requirement, who have been waiting for the reauthorization of SBIR, who have been waiting to commercially sort of work on commercialization of their product. Now is the time to really get back involved, because we have 5 years now of uninterrupted funding. A lot of people I work with, kind of fell out of the program during all the pauses and during while waiting for the reauthorization. So, if you're coming back now, really familiarizing yourself with the additional, work that you're going to have to take on, because at the end of the day, that's, a lot of this is putting sort of an additional sort of check in place that businesses need to be aware of for good reason. It's not creating additional paperwork, but it's increasing the security and compliance burden for sure of the program. So really taking a holistic look at if you're looking at that direct to phase 2, if you're already sort of familiar with the program, taking your old documentation, seeing the changes that need to be made, and then also seeing if there's additional funding that if you were planning on doing a direct to phase 2, like a year or two ago, it might be a little bit different now. I think that's really, so advice wise, it's really so dependent.
Well, I think the advice that I've heard is to reach out to you.
Oh yeah, that too. Yeah, obviously, just call me actually.
And I'll help you out 100%. No, there's a ton of great resources, both our Apex, other Apex accelerators, SBIR TAP, and then once you get into the every state, right, is going to have slightly different resources as well. Like New York State has matching SBIR funds that you can apply for. So that's something I'll know about. I'm not going to know about something like that in Arizona. So definitely, even if you're not in our service area, please reach out to, you can reach out to us and we can refer you over, but reach out to sort of some local resources as well as federal ones to see if there's additional opportunity within your region.
I really appreciate both of you and being here today and having this lovely conversation. Are there any final thoughts that either of you would like to leave us with before we wrap up?
Yeah, I guess and I've already touched on this too, so I will not belabor it too much, but I think it's really overwhelming. Just like this whole, I mentioned in my introduction, I've been doing this for almost 5 years now. And I still I didn't even know off the top of my head the exact funding amounts because they were just changed, right? There's so much cybersecurity. There's just a lot of compliance stuff that goes into it. So I just really like taking everything one step at a time because it's very, very doable if you don't, make a 100, bullet long checklist at the start and then look at it and say, oh no, this is all I have to do. Nothing's going to happen in a day, and it really is all doable, especially with all of, the plethora of resources out there. Just really make sure you're taking it with baby steps at first and know it just continues to get easier as you build that knowledge base. So yeah, again, not to harp too much on that, but it's a lot of technical information that no one expects you to know off the bat.
Make sure you read the directions.
Yeah, read the directions.
Find alignment of anything that you're looking for with what your goals are and where you want to be.
Yeah.
Well, that was another episode of the Ignite You New York podcast powered by NICETech. I'm your host, Shay Brown, and today we got to sit down with some incredible people, Kim Fredericks and Finn Kreidler here hanging out with us. If you have any questions, make sure you reach out to Empire Apex Accelerator. And if you liked what you heard today, make sure you give us a like, share, and subscribe, and we will see you next time.